Good morning, everyone. Welcome to JVS Job Seekers. My name is Elisa Udaskin, and I'm a director here at JVS, Jewish Vocational Service. And we are located in East Orange and Montclair, New Jersey. So happy to see people from across the country, some in Montreal and Toronto as well, which is always lovely. We're always happy to have everyone here. A little bit about JVS. We were founded in 1939, and we basically we're a nonprofit workforce development agency. And what we do is we help people overcome obstacles that they face in their journey to find a job, and we help them land on their feet and get a new job. Our JBS Job Seekers webinars, which this is part of that you're here today, are generously funded by the Network of Jewish Human Service Organization agency, and it is Project M is the specific grant, and by the Jewish Federation of Greater Metro West. And we thank them so much for their funding, which makes this available at no charge to all of you. With that said, I haven't really asked about this before, but it reminded me to ask you guys is this morning I got an email from one of our participants saying, Elisa, I'm not going to be able to make it this morning because I landed a job. And I'm like, yay. And she said, these job seeker webinars have been really helpful and useful. I want to really ask all of you that when you, not if, but when you land your job, please email me and share your good news. That always helps with the funders to share the efficacy of our programs. So I am now very delighted to introduce our guest speaker today, Rachel Serwetz. A little bit about Rachel. She worked at Goldman Sachs in operations and at Bridgewater Associates in HR. From there, she was trained as a coach at NYU and became a certified coach through the International Coach Federation. After this, Rachel worked in HR research at Aon Hewitt and attained her technology MBA at NYU Stern. Throughout her career, Rachel has helped hundreds of professionals with career exploration, and for the past over 8 years, she has been building her company Woken, which is an online career exploration platform to coach professionals through the process of clarifying their ideal job and career path. Rachel has also served as an adjunct professor of entrepreneurship at Binghamton University and as a career coach through the Flatiron School WeWork, Columbia University, and Project Activate. Very happy to introduce Rachel to you. And before I get into handing over to Rachel, one more piece is you guys are used to in these webinars, I want your questions. You put the question in the chat with your name, and then we open it up and you can ask the questions. We're expecting a lot of people today. So Rachel and I discussed we're going to do a little differently. Please ask your questions, type it into the chat, put a Q and then your question. And we're having, at the end of each section, Rachel's going to pause and I will read out your questions for you. As always, we're going to be staying on afterwards. We're ending at 11:30. And if any questions were not answered throughout the session, Rachel and I will be answering them for you. Okay. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Rachel.
All right. I'm excited to be here with you all. And we are just gonna dive right in. Elisa already introduced who I am, so I'll skip right over this. Today we have like a bunch of different topics, so I think we are gonna hopefully pause after each slide and maybe me and Elisa can have a little bit of a chat to go deeper on each of these topics. So we're gonna jump around a bit, and again, if you do have questions, just put them in the chat. Okay, so AI, we probably all heard of it. We may or may not have used it yet. It is impacting the job search. So I wanted to start with that. ATS, if you don't know what ATS is, it's an applicant tracking system. And basically, all that means is that when you apply to a job online, that's the tool that's being used both for you and then on the recruiter side, that's the tool that they're using. And so those tools are screening resumes. They're looking at keywords. They're even looking at the formatting of the document. And it matters now more than ever. The computer and the technology may be looking at your resume before a human ever may see it. So it's important to think about what is the computer looking for? But of course, we still want a resume that speaks to who we are. It's just there's now this concept of we need to look at, using keywords that relate to our target job and make sure those keywords are present in our resume. Um, Job postings are much easier to create than before, and so we do have a whole slide later on today to talk about like scams and what do we do about that. So you definitely need more discernment than ever. And personalization is now more important than ever. So it's this interesting dichotomy because as much as everybody needs to use these keywords, it can start to make a lot of resumes look similar. So you still want to use those right keywords, but you still want to add some customization so that you can stand out. Something I like to do is add a professional summary at the top of your resume, and that's a great way to, in your own words, describe who you are. And that's kind of a nice way to be really authentic about, who you are as a professional. Hiring is moving faster, but more selectively, right? So the AI is helping with the speed and also handling high volumes of candidates and applicants. But it may mean it's harder to get an interview, right? There's higher expectations, and the technology is making it easier to screen that high volume of candidates. So, we kind of need to do more beyond these online applications to go out of our way, get our foot in the door, network, and land opportunities, right? Um, Online applications, even when I started 8 years ago, were not always, you know, the sole thing we could rely on, but even now I would say it's less, right? And so as much as online applications are important, it's just a piece of the puzzle, and there's a lot of other things you want to do in your job search to break in. Skills are prioritized over titles, right? So job titles are really important, but having all these transferable skills, showing that you've done these things before, and showing that you've made impact, that's so, so, so important because again, the AI is going to screen this resume and analyze, how much of a fit you are. Um, Now, job seekers can use AI too. So if you haven't already used it, something like ChatGPT or Claude or any tool like that, you can really tailor your materials. You can prepare for interviews, and figure out what roles you're a fit for. Now, be careful a little bit. When I say tailor materials, you don't want the AI to write your resume for you or cover letter, but you can let it help you get unstuck with how best to phrase things, how to quantify your impact and your achievements, and just sort of use it as a sounding board and a thought partner as you're working on things. So yeah, that's a really quick overview of how AI is sort of playing into the job search right now. Um, and please tell us in the chat, have you leveraged AI yet or not yet? And if there's anything in particular that you like to leverage AI for your job search, would love to hear in the chat if people are willing to share. And again, if you have questions, I'll take a quick pause before we move on from AI. I don't know, Lisa, if you have any questions on this topic before we keep going. But I know there's a lot, sometimes confusion, sometimes it feels daunting how fast tech is moving. So just want to give a moment here to see if this feels clear. And I'm just
Um,
checking the chat as well. Yeah.
there's one question, but I don't know if you're going to be going into, I'll just ask the question and then you'll go into more detail, right? So, the question is, can you opt out of AI? Will it knock you? I don't know exactly what that means,
Yeah,
but
I have seen on some applications the option to like not have AI screen.
ah,
Um, but I think it's rare to see that option. And truthfully, I'd have to do more research on whether that's like beneficial and whether that's the thing you would want to do. Um, my instinct is saying, hey, if we opt out of the AI review, does that mean a human has to review it? In which case, that might be nice. But truthfully, this might be kind of a very meta answer. I'd go to ChatGPT and I'd be like, it's giving me the option to opt out. Like, should I? And so whenever we're researching these new trends, we should ask those strategies, right? As things are changing, as options arise, we can sort of ask ChatGPT. Truthfully, I don't have the answer. I'd want to research that more to see is that beneficial. But my instinct says, yeah, if a human's going to review it, that's nice. But I'd want to make sure I'm not missing anything there. And that's what ChatGPT is great for. Now, granted, I would never fully solely rely on AI. Sometimes there's things that are not factual, it can hallucinate, but at the same time, it can be very comprehensive in the answers that it does give. So if you feel like, let me, know how to think about this. Let me just, you know what I mean? It doesn't need to decide for you, but it might tell you, here's the factors of why you would or would not opt in or opt out. And then you can think about it for yourself, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's another question that's kind of related, and I think you kind of answered it, but what insight can you share on the use of AI to tailor a resume? I find a low return on resumes where AI is used.
Yeah.
Any
Yeah. So
thoughts?
definitely
So,
don't use AI to write the whole bullet. Like you definitely need to write it yourself. What I would use AI to do is to identify the keywords. So you might upload to ChatGPT and say, here's 5 job descriptions I really like. I think they're a fit for me. What are the top 20 keywords that I need to incorporate in my resume to make sure I'm tailoring the resume appropriately for ATS? And then you're going to make sure those keywords are interspersed throughout your document. You can also ask ChatGPT, is my resume ATS friendly? Because as I mentioned earlier, there's formatting and then there's keywords. So the content and the formatting are both important for ATS. So use ChatGPT as a thought partner to be strategic to make sure your document is, up to speed. You can even upload your resume and say, how can I improve this? But just be careful that you're not copy pasting a whole bullet. It should really still sound like you in the words that you would use if you were to go do an interview. But again, I think it's like, what are those keywords I need to have and include? Because, we're human. So you might say it one way and the job description says it another way. So you don't necessarily, I think when people start copy pasting from job applications, like you don't need to do that, but just make sure that your resume has the common keywords that are used for the path that you're typically applying to. I like to use what I call like a powerhouse resume. So instead of tailoring your resume to every single job posting, think about, okay, you're always applying to like marketing roles or whatever the job is or customer service. And you could say, okay, these 20 words are always appearing typically in customer service type jobs. Let me make sure my resume has all of those. And then you don't have to feel like you're constantly changing your resume for every single job application. So the AI can still help you strengthen it, but don't let it write the whole thing for you.
yeah, and I think that, there's one of the questions that just came through is, do the recruiters have software that detect if it's, AI driven? And you
Yeah.
know what? Even if they didn't, once a human reads it and it reads like it's AI, they'll be able to see that. So
Yeah.
what
I
Rachel's
think it's
saying, and we,
both. Yeah, I think it's absolutely both.
yeah,
Recruiters can tell for sure. And I've heard from, hiring managers and recruiters, they absolutely can tell. And then yes, I actually would imagine the ATS probably is starting to have tools like that potentially. I don't know for sure. I'd have to actually research that. But the point is, why ever risk it? Like be the human like always be the last edit. You know what I mean? Use the tool to help you strengthen it, to unblock you if you're stuck, if you're not sure. You could even say, here's some bullets. How do I quantify this? Or is my impact clear? Where can I include metrics? So you can ask it questions of like what you're not sure of, or you can say, how does this sound? But just don't let it like write for you. Let it help you strengthen it and support you in making you feel good and confident about the document. The other thing too is you can use a peer, a mentor, a coach, somebody at JBS. Like sometimes having another pair of human eyes on the resume is honestly better and easier and
yes.
sometimes more comfortable than just leveraging ChatGPT. So, just pick your poison and know that with resumes, it's like this endless, it will always feel like you can edit it. It never feels done. So just try to like limit your time a little bit because as much as there's tools around this, it should not be 100% of your time. Maybe 10% of your job search efforts could go towards your materials. There's so many other things you need to be doing. And maybe like once or twice a week, you look at your resume and you strengthen it. But you should not be sitting there for hours every single day on the resume. I always say when you're like sitting behind the screen, no one's meeting you. You need to be getting out there, meeting people, being really scrappy and resourceful and creative and doing lots of different activities and events and joining groups and just doing more human oriented things so that you're a person, people meet you out there in the world. A human's going to hire you, not a computer. So trying to meet people is still the key. So just balance. Like this is all important, but it's just a portion of your time, you know?
Yeah, and I would just reiterate what Rachel is saying. So this is just one component. It's kind of like a necessary, but it's you have to do networking and all of those other things. But in order, these are just tips and tricks to be able to get through to getting a human being asking you or calling you for a screener for an interview. The other thing, Rachel, that I have seen when I've reviewed resumes is sometimes a lot of times people you have acronyms in your resumes. You're trying to get as much as you can in there. So give an example. So somebody who is in the pharmaceutical industry, and they'll have OTC all over their resume, right? Okay, OTC and another acronym, and they'll do OTC forward slash, and it's like 8 characters together. And so, what I encourage that person to do is look at when you're applying for a job, look at the job posting, and do they write it as OTC forward slash, I forget the other acronym right now, and there's like ABC. And if they don't write it that way, then maybe it's OTC space and the other acronym, or
Right.
maybe they spell it out completely. And those are just minor tweaks you have to do to that resume version. Exactly what Rachel is saying. You're not recreating because, like, it needs to be your resume, but those are the small things that if you match how it's written in in the job posting, it will increase your chances of getting through.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All
acronyms
right,
is a
let's
big
keep
one.
going. How did that sound, Elisa?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right, so we're going to talk about the concept of upskilling. So, to me, what upskilling means is skill development. It means what is your field and essentially assessing the skill requirements for your target job and identifying if you have any gaps. So, you may say, I meet 80 or 90% of these requirements, but there's 10 to 20% that I need to still work on, right? Nobody's like perfect. I mean, we might try to find things we're 100% a fit for, and that would be great. But there's always things we should work on developing. So, what are the benefits of upskilling? First of all, it gives you something to talk about when you're networking and you're interviewing. You could say, oh, I'm doing this course, or I'm working on this certification, or I'm working on this project, or anything like that. It boosts your confidence, right? So, we all talk about the morale in job search and how it's like, daunting and overwhelming sometimes, it makes it feel more fun when you're like working on projects that you're actually interested in. And giving interviewers confidence, right? So you're committed to that path, especially if you're trying to pivot or make a change. You want to show you are investing your time towards that direction. And if you're in a course or a certification or working on a project, even if it's pro bono, you're showing you're putting time to learn what you need to learn. And of course, it can be included on your material. So if you need to learn something about AI or learn whatever skill it is, you can add that to your materials that you're in the process of doing those things. How can you decide? It's really important to be thoughtful. Don't just dive into any course randomly that you think people might value. You really need to ask yourself, okay, number one, what are my transferable skills? You need to understand your current and past skill set. And then you need to say, okay, like what are the actual requirements for my target job? And you're sort of matching those together. And when you do that, it helps you determine the open gaps, right? So based on my target job, based on my current skill set, what are the skill gaps I want to work on? And what are the priorities? So you may say, look, there's these three things I need to work on, but this one in particular is the most important. You also want to network. So you want to talk to hiring managers or just people in your target job and really see what do you value? What do you look for? Who have you hired in the past and what did they have on their resume? What was in their background? Sometimes And you can, of course, do online research as well to see what's out there. But then you want to go through a moment of comparing and contrasting your options. There's just so many different formats and ways of learning. And you want to consider that format because you might talk to somebody and they say, look, you really need this certification. Or they may say, I'd rather see that you did more projects in this area and I want to build up your portfolio and see that you have, past experiences. Or it's more of a formal course or certification. Those are slightly different, feeling to what that skill and what that experience, that learning experience sort of gives and shows on your resume. So it really depends on the role. Like, something as specific as accounting is going to maybe need some like licenses and certifications or whatever it is, finance. But if there's something else, like maybe it's customer success, you might just take a course, or maybe you're taking a course on AI and you just show that you're learning it, right? And then you decide. So you might need to take 2 weeks or 3 weeks to go through the process of exploring your options. Go slow and be thorough and really get to the point of confidence in, okay, this thing is going to be worth my time based on where I'm trying to go in my career, especially if the upskilling is going to cost you anything. Sometimes it's a great investment, but the way to know for sure is to go through this process of being really thoughtful about where you stand, where you're trying to go, and what is the best, way of getting where you're trying to go. I hope this makes sense. I'll give it a pause for questions. I don't really have a chat prompt, but if you're doing here's the chat prompt. If you are doing upskilling right now, let us know what you're working on. If you're learning something, if you're working on a project at this moment, would love to hear that in the chat. Or maybe you're looking into a course or a certification or something like that, or you're looking to start a project. And yeah, I'll give it a pause, Elisa, if you have any questions on upskilling.
Okay, let's just give it a second and we'll take a look at the chat if anybody has questions about upskilling. The other thing, Rachel, is that there with upskilling and all the steps that you suggest, there's also going to be the trade-off of investment of how much money it costs and time, right? So there are going to be some um, that are very worthwhile, the time and the money. And what you want to do is like look at what the return is. Like if you take, let's say it's an expensive course. If you take it, what are the salaries when you look at job postings for what kind of job you're going for? So you want to look at that as well. And I know, Rachel, you probably already, you know what? This happened last time too. I don't know who writes these squiggles on this. Does everybody see a squiggle on the screen?
Yeah, I just disabled the annotation. I don't know if that's what this is, but I honestly don't know how to get that away.
Me either. And I've tried last time. I'm sorry, everybody. I don't know how to.
Oh, I did
Okay.
it. I fixed it.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. And you disabled it. I tried last time to disable it. Okay. Somebody likes to scribble. But basically, there are some courses, especially if you're looking to switch careers, that are worthwhile and you plan for it, but always look at what is that job posting or that job, those jobs that you want to get from, what is that salary and is that return on investment worthwhile for you? And then there are other ones that are going to be sort of low-hanging fruit. They're not going to cost as much. They will take time, but maybe they're very low cost or they're free and they're worthwhile for your goals. So just look at your ROI.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I
Are
mean,
there any? Go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, that's absolutely the point. I mean, things
Yeah.
don't necessarily have to be costly, but that's kind of why you could take 2 weeks, 3 weeks, like give yourself a phase to just look into things. If it costs money, like the more money it costs, the more time you should think about it.
Yeah.
And if you talk to 5 people in your target job, like, and they all say, yes, this is absolutely worthwhile and we always require this, then you'll have more confidence. So just take your time to look into things. If it's free or low cost, you might, not take as much time, but still, the point is you want to look into it because even if it doesn't cost you money, it takes up your time. So you want to make sure you're doing something that is worthwhile.
So, Rachel, what's your opinion on platforms like Udemy and I don't know what other one, give me names of other ones where they
Yeah, like
say that they have,
Coursera and stuff. Yeah.
thank you, that was it, Coursera, Udemy, and it's like, they have, the professors from UPenn, from Wharton, from, all of that and courses, and you take those. So, what is your opinion on on those in terms first of all, there's personal learning, which you will always get. But I guess my question is in terms of what those qualifications do for your resume for the potential employer.
Yeah, and there was an LinkedIn Learning, but
LinkedIn
the,
Learning, yeah.
yeah, the point is I'm not going to say those are like looked down upon by any means. The point is, you have to look into it for your field. And so, if this is like a nice to have where you're like, I fully meet the requirements, I'm just sort of going above and beyond, then sure, any sort of format, is good. But especially if you have like a true gap, you want to just make sure you're talking to people in your field to make sure things are worthwhile, and just to assess your options, right? Look into it and maybe find somebody that did that course before. So it really just depends. Like if you have a true skill gap based on your role requirements, you want to look into it even more deeply. But if you're like, I mostly meet all the requirements, this is just like an added bonus for me to, learn AI or learn whatever it is. I'm not going to say it doesn't matter the format, but it's a little less critical. But if you're like, look, I really only meet 70 to 80%, and there's something I have to learn in order to even land this job in the first place, then it's really more important to talk to people and make sure, because, when you talk to people, they may say, "Oh, don't even bother with that." Like
Yeah.
not that they look down upon it, but the hiring managers are going to be able to tell you like how well they value certain things and it really depends on the field. And there's a lot out there. So honestly, just talking to people is the best way to know kind of what's most worth your time and how people really perceive the, reputation of some of these things, right? But I think it also depends on how much are you
Hmm.
already a fit? If you're already a fit and you're going above and beyond, great. Like do any course that feels good for you. But if you're have that gap, it's much more important to make sure you're doing the right things that they really need to see from you.
Yeah, I think that that's a really good differentiation because there's about learning for yourself and to become, you take these courses on Coursera, LinkedIn Learning, Udemy, to be more articulate, to be more knowledgeable. It will only give you more about how you can articulate yourself and show that you're an expert in your field. But it might not necessarily be as be as important for like credentials when an employer is looking at you. But it definitely, if you're in transition right now and you have the time, it is also something good to do these courses, any of them, to just continuous learning. That's the good too. I had one tip for everybody. So there's a website called mynextmove.org. It's the New Jersey, actually, I think it might be national, but we use it in New Jersey with a lot of different training courses that you can look into. And it's a really good tool that is with the One Stop, which used to be called the Unemployment Office, but now they're called One Stops. And I think they have them in every state. Jason just put mynextmove.org. So there's a lot of information on there about apprenticeships, about trainings, about credentials, and you can do research in terms of if you're looking for a career switch, what are the different courses that you could take, things like that. It's a pretty cool website. Okay, I think there's a couple of questions, Rachel, if you don't mind me
Yeah,
looking.
yeah.
Okay. Um, does recurrent count as upskilling? What is recurrent? What?
It's the word he used.
How to integrate resume. One second. Okay, Scott, sorry, give me a second. Does recurrent what? Scott, does recurrent training count as upskilling and how would you integrate it into a resume, into an interview? I'll say it
Recurrent.
again.
I don't know
Does,
what
rec-
recurrent means.
yeah,
If,
either
if
do I.
Scott, if you want to clarify that in the chat, we can better answer you.
Yeah,
But we can come back to that, maybe.
thank you. Okay.
Anything else you want me to, or ready to keep going?
Everything else, and you know what I love is in this chat, and this always happens with this group, is people are sharing tips with each other and answering and having tips about other things and resources, which is wonderful. So keep doing that, guys. Okay. So if there's a question for Rachel, put a Q in it. And other than that, keep going and talking to each other. Okay, keep going, Rachel.
Okay. Um, so we're going to talk about networking. This is super critical. And, when we talk about how job search is changing, networking is just simply becoming more important than it ever was. So you're probably already familiar and you kind of need to do all the same things, but more. So, what is networking? It's authentic learning conversations. It's not forcing a check the box questions. When I say check the box, a lot of times people try to network with somebody in their field and they just ask what they think they're supposed to ask. But you got to be authentic. You want to hop on a call with somebody and really ask yourself, what questions are on my mind? And with AI and changing technology, we all have questions about how our field is changing. So you really want to learn from that person. Like, what is their role? What are their projects? How are things evolving? Learn about their department, learn about their company, learn about their industry. Like, really jot down. You could even do this right now. And, like, without a conversation lined up, you could ask yourself, what are 5 or 10 or 15 questions I have about my field and just write those down. So just make sure it's authentic. What would really help you learn about you might have options of roles that you're considering or industries you're considering, like what's on your mind genuinely and what would help you move forward, what would help you better understand your own field and your space and your options. And that's what those calls are really meant to be about. I personally define networking as a one-on-one meeting. It's usually 20 to 30 minutes. If you are sending somebody a message in LinkedIn or an email or even joining events, that's networking. It's a part of it, but the truest goal is to have these one-on-one conversations with people in your target jobs, where you can ask them questions and you can, learn from them. And that's the ultimate, goal that you really, if you're not doing that, I'm not going to say you're not networking, but I think a lot of people think they're networking because they're showing up to events, but that's not really it. You need to have these one-on-one conversations. Um, you want to be specific. So if you see somebody's LinkedIn profile and you see where they worked or they were in a certain job or they had a certain trajectory, you really want to customize your message to say, oh, I'd love to ask you about, your role here or your skills that you use day to day or how, tech is changing the field or, the difference between this role and that role. You don't need to lay out a whole agenda, but, don't, a lot of people just say, oh, I'd love to pick your brain. And it looks like a copy pastable message that you could send to anyone. So customize your message to people. Make it really feel like you took 20 minutes to figure out, like, why are you actually reaching out to them? How can they help you? And you're going to use their time wisely. So that's really important to, be thoughtful about what you say. Um, Find warm connections and introductions, right? So this is not cold outreach to strangers. It's thinking about, like, who do you know and who do they know? So a lot of times we assume that we know who our network knows. But like your family, your cousins, your friends, your neighbor, they may know people that you don't really realize who they know. So you're going to message everyone you know personally and say, oh, like, I'm looking to meet people who do X, Y, and Z. Do you mind making some introductions? I'm looking to have informational calls to learn more from them. Honestly, I wouldn't mention anything about job search. I would just say, I'm looking to learn. I'm figuring out my career path. I want to ask these people these types of questions. I'm looking to understand the field. I'm looking to explore my options. I'm looking to clarify my direction, things like that. And really make it all about your growth, your career development. That's something people feel they can help with. And if they don't have an open job, sometimes they feel uncomfortable. So I really wouldn't even talk about job search. I would talk about, can you help me meet people? So leverage your network, leverage your alumni network. Or if you do join groups and events, you might meet people organically that way too. But try not to just like reach out to random people who don't know you and try to build those warm connections. And you guys, by the way, can even network with each other. There's literally 100 people right now, which is so incredible. If you each chatted with each other, you might each be able to introduce someone to each other. And so you might have a connection that helps somebody else, and maybe they don't help you, but then you can sort of swap connections even with peers in job search. Mutually beneficial, right? So this isn't just you asking for support. Like whoever you're talking to at the other end of the line, you can still help them. You can share your knowledge, you can share resources, you can share your network. So whoever you're asking for their time on a phone call, you can still lend your help to them as well. reflect and prepare. So a lot of times people just jump on these calls without any prep. You really want to be as thoughtful as you can. I mean, your prep doesn't need to be more than 30 minutes, but really sit there and say, what do I need out of this call? And it's going to make a huge difference if you have a prepared list of questions, you phrase it out, you have an agenda, and it's going to show that you show up professionally, right? It's going to look good on you and it's going to make sure you're not wasting your own time or theirs. Um, Long-term relationship, this is not just a one-time help. Sometimes it's hard to stay in touch with everybody, but it is something where you might meet people that you really get along with, and you might meet a mentor or a mentee, and you might want to meet with somebody 2, 3 times a year and stay in touch with them and help each other along the way. It's not just, transactional. Um, you want to uncover aligned opportunities. And what I mean by that is when you um when you run this call in a really organic, authentic way and you're actually asking questions that matter to you, by the end of the call, it's going to naturally arise where by the end they may say, "Oh, like based on all your interests and skills, I'd love to introduce you to this person." Or you're going to learn about their team and their department and you're going to say, "Oh, based on everything you explained, this team or that team sounds super relevant to my skill sets. Is there any opportunities going on over there?" So you're trying to understand each other's world in the most honest way, and it will naturally lead to some next steps. Ongoing and proactive. So, like, even when you're not in job search, just be networking. You don't have to do it all the time, but like once a month, once a quarter, try to meet somebody that's not at your current organization so you can always just build relationships. And tap into your network's network. We talked about that a little bit, but don't assume you don't know anybody. You have to really, open your mind to seeing like who do you know and who do they know, and you have to ask to see what introductions your network can make for you. So, does this clear up anything about networking? Tell us in the chat if this feels better at all, or if you still have questions. This would be a good time to let us know about networking. What does this help clear up, and what is still on your mind? I know this is always a hot topic. So yeah, let us know any reactions, thoughts on networking. Give it a few minutes because I know this is a big topic. But yeah, if anyone has thoughts, if this helps clarify things, or if you have questions, um, what if you're introverted? That's a great question. Yeah, Roger, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, okay. There's a lot coming in. Elisa, you'll help me read through this. But
Yeah.
with Brett's question, I mean, introversion is very much real. I actually have a blog on this, but for an introvert, I would just treat it like a process, right? So it's still a person at the other end of the line, but like you could do a phone call instead of a video. You don't have to do it in person. And think about your step-by-step process. Let me research some people, find some names and introductions, use LinkedIn as a research tool, draft my message, and just go step by step. You could draft an email without any intention of sending it, just to figure out what phrasing you're comfortable with. And then maybe you start sending some emails. You also might start out networking with like a friend or somebody that, you're a little like more comfortable with. That's another good way to like ease into it and rip the band-aid off. And sometimes when you start, practicing, it starts to just become easier when you start small. You can even do a little mock practice with a peer or somebody at JVS, right? So like sort of do a mock networking section. Um, and yeah, again, I think like just being on the phone could be a way to feel better about it. You can still get all the value from a phone call. Um, and I would also just ask yourself what else is holding you up. I think there's a lot of hesitations. People assume networking is icky. Like, you need to kind of, and we all need to look at our mindset about like, are we assuming things about networking? Are we looking at it in the wrong way? Are we, assuming it's bad? Or, are we, do we need to redefine what networking means to me? So like, what would networking mean if it was comfortable for me? And just take the time to reflect on that. And then just honestly, just easing into it. Is kind of half the battle. Like if you keep putting it off, it's always going to feel scary, but just start really small, start with like a friend, and once you start doing it, I think you'll actually people realize they enjoy it once they're in it. Like you will be learning things hopefully about a field that's interesting to you. So like once you're engaging with people, it usually feels a little bit better. But if you are somebody that gets really nervous, A, like still practice, but B, just, think about other tools that are going to help you be less nervous during the call. You might have a written agenda in front of you, right? Whatever tools are going to help you feel a little calmer about it. But truthfully, I think when people just slowly get started, it just becomes more habit and they get more used to it. And then once you do it two or three or four times, you're like, now I know what this is. I know what it feels like. And the other thing you just need to realize about networking is there's so many different types of people in this world, and you're going to see that in job search, right? So some people are going to have an hour-long call with you and they're so kind, and other people are going to be awkward, and other people are going to be quiet, and you need to really push the agenda. And the average person will just be somewhere in the middle. But you might see people who don't answer you, and you might see people that say, "No, I don't have time." And you might see people who are confused by what you're asking. And a lot of people think you're just asking for a job when really you're asking for a conversation. So you're going to see all kinds of things. So it's really will strengthen your ability to say, how do I direct other people to best help me? So it's kind of a messy world out there. And it's like job search sort of forces you to uh, organize others. Like, how do I get the best help from other people? How do I be the most clear in my outreach message? So it sort of becomes this exercise for you to strengthen your own approaches. Um, yeah, I hope that helps. Elise, if there's any other
Yeah.
questions. Yeah.
No, that's excellent. Yeah, yes, a couple, and you touched on it a bit, but I think it's worth like reinforcing. So one question is, how do we not sound like a robot? I'm gonna say actually three together because I think you can talk. Okay. How do we not sound like a robot or nervous when speaking in networking social situations?
Uh-huh.
The other point is networking seems to only be to help those who have a network. I feel like I'm doing like a game show with you. And then the third, because I want you to integrate these in your answer, is how to use AI for interview prep. And a few people asked that, and I would say, how to use AI for informational interview or informational networking. And okay, I'll let
Okay, let
you
me
answer.
try
I
to
have
go
my
through each
thoughts.
one. Yeah, and if I forget. Okay, so the
Yeah,
first one
yeah.
was the
Okay.
robot. Like, so if you're in a
I'll look at
social setting, or say you're at an event, honestly, you should just be yourself. I mean, be your professional self. But you don't need to sound like rehearsed or anything. Like if you are on a meeting with a one-on-one person on a phone or video meeting, then you're going to have an agenda. You still should be authentic.
you.
Don't be robotic. But if you're at an event, you're probably talking to somebody for 5 minutes because there's so many people there and you're moving from group to group. So in that case, you can absolutely just be yourself and ask what they do and ask questions, and maybe you grab their email address and you follow up with them later. It's too hard to, you don't need to be rehearsed. If anything, you want to practice your elevator pitch or your professional summary. Sometimes that becomes a little rehearsed because you're practicing how to summarize who you are. But other than that, it's okay to be in the moment, and that's the best way to get the most out of it, because you need to just like listen and learn, like, who is this person? And in the back of your head, you're kind of like, could they help me, and should we be connected after this event?
Right.
But always be yourself first. And, again, if you're in a one-on-one meeting, you might have a list of questions, but you can tell the person and say, I've prepared an agenda. I hope that's okay. And they're usually receptive and grateful that you did that. So you have an agenda, but then in the moment, if they ask something and you have a follow-up question, you can just go deeper and sort of, dig into it. Um, your second question,
Hey, I just wanted
oh,
to add
sure.
to the, so you take it, so I find it's always helpful. There's different situations, right? So you may be attending a networking breakfast, a networking event. And in that case, like I just led one at a synagogue here in West Orange. And so we played networking bingo. So I had people going around to introduce themselves. So to what Rachel said, 100% be yourself, but have that one line opener at least of how you want to present yourself. Okay. That will take the stress out of it, is if you at least know like that 10 seconds how you want to introduce yourself. And if you're uncomfortable about doing this, because it's not comfortable all the time, practice, like what Rachel said. I'm just reiterating, practice with a friend, practice with, you're at your kid's soccer game or you're at anything, even if you're at ShopRite and you're like, you say you just want to practice with anyone, just
Yeah.
practice, practice,
Yeah.
practice, practice, and then you'll be more comfortable doing that. Um, the point, the somebody made a statement which I thought was worth us talking about again, that you only have only the people who have a network. I don't know what, so it was something like that. I think the point that we want to get across on that, because I'm going to answer it, is that everyone can have a network. Okay. It may be that you feel that you don't have a network because you haven't been keeping in touch with a lot of people ongoing, because you've been so focused on, your current job and things like that, and you don't feel that you have a network. But what Rachel is saying is anybody can be your network. When you go to get your hair cut, you could sit in the chair and you're talking to your hairdresser, and they may have another client who they're like, you know what, you really should.
Yeah, I literally had a chiropractor who introduced me to one of her clients. So, and it's funny you say the hairdresser because I always think about that for myself. I'm like, I should probably tell all
Yep.
the hairdressers who I am. So that's exactly right. So be open to it, right? So yes, you can do this direct outreach to like your network, but just in a social setting. Like if you're at a party, you don't need to spend the whole time talking about your job search, but just be open because a lot of times there's research on you land jobs often, not you, but people land jobs often from that second warm, indirect connection that becomes like, I know somebody and they know somebody, that loose connection. So it could be a
Mhm.
hairdresser that makes a connection for you. So just be comfortable to say, here's what I'm working on, here's what I do. Here's the people I'm looking to connect with, or here's the type of opportunities I'm looking. Another, and I get to this later in our slides, if you ever just need a good framework for like your summary, background, strengths, direction, it's a great three-part framework that you can just keep in your back pocket and practice it. But I agree with Elisa, just like be comfortable. Again, you don't have to spend your whole Friday night talking about it, but be ready because people like to know, who you are, what do you do? And you can make it positive. Like even though you're not working right now, it could be like, here's what you do, here's what you typically do, here's what you're looking to do. That can be positive. It doesn't have to be like, I'm not working right now. It could just be like, yeah, I'm in this field. I'm excited to work on A, B, and C, or these are the projects I look to do that I thrive in. It can be positive even if you're not like currently working. So, and people resonate with that too. Like they want to hear your excitement about projects and not like, we are all down in job search. I mean, job search is hard. So the emotional stamina is real, but in those moments when you connect with others, try to like show up as that professional who has some interesting things to say. And you might talk about a past project. You might talk about projects you want to get involved with, right? So that positive energy. You don't have to be like a happy jumping bean. You don't need to force it, but just try to find like a neutral sort of common ground where people can learn about you, and you never know where it's going to lead.
Okay, just two more. So Greg, your question is really about ghosting, and so we can save that to the end, and we can talk about that. I want to let everybody know that Rachel is actually going to be our speaker again. I'm talking about mindset and resilience in April, and a lot of these topics, some of the questions that are coming up, we're going to have a deep dive into that area then. But Greg, we will definitely entertain your question at the end. But there is one more recurring question, which was how to use AI for interview prep. And
Yeah, so with that, I would upload the job posting and I would tell it the stage of the interview. If it's a first round with HR or a second or third, and like who you're interviewing with. And just say like, what are the top questions I should prepare for? What's amazing about AI is that, if you ask it for 50 questions, it will give you 50 questions. Now, you don't need to go overboard, but what I like about sort of overdoing it is that it can push the creativity so that, say you have, first of all, you should do proactive interview prep like well before. So you could say, give me one question in a day, even before you have an interview, in front of you. You should just proactively prepare. Um, but if you do have an interview ready to go, upload that JD and say, what are 30 questions they might ask me? And here's the stage of it. Of course, it can suggest things about how you should respond, but it may not know your entire background. Of course, you can upload your resume for context. But I would still just be sure to practice out loud. Don't just type your answers. Oh, here's what I would say. How's that? It can give you feedback, but actually, what I've done recently was there's a speech to text thing. So if you were to practice speaking out loud, you could hit the record, speak your words, and then send it because that way it's like, how does this really come out of my mouth and not just like typing it? I'm also going to send in the chat another tool that I love, and it actually does like a video based practice with you so that, you can, it will look at, everything, your tone, your energy, your pace, as well as the words of what you're saying. So yeah, tools like that are great to practice. And with interviews, like practicing out loud is the most important thing. And then, of course, what questions are you going to ask the interviewer? You could work on that. But, that's one of those times where you want to be careful to not just have AI generated questions. When you ask the interviewer questions, try to be authentic, try to be strategic. What questions would you ask if it was day one on the job? What are your most strategic and interesting questions about the work, the company, the team? Because that really shows that you're thinking seriously about the role. So just be a little careful there. But yeah, it can help with all of that. Yeah, cool.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Okay. So,
Thank you.
branding, we've talked a little bit about this already. Professional summary. Your background, your strengths, your direction. So this professional summary can go at the top of your resume. It can also be the about section on your LinkedIn. So in terms of your background, what are 3 to 5 key skill sets and what industries have you been exposed to? Your strengths. This is an amazing way to use your own words to tell them what you're actually amazing at. Now, be careful here because everybody's a great communicator and a great problem solver. So, and a team player. So just try to be a little more unique, a little more authentic, go deeper. What are you great at? Why are you great at it? And then your direction. Like, I think a lot of people get nervous around saying what it is you're looking for, but I actually suggest doing this. If you are too broad or vague, they don't know who you are or where you want to go. So tell them what roles you're looking for. This is a great 3 sentence little paragraph that's super powerful, and it can serve as the elevator pitch that you practice when you talk out loud as well and you introduce yourself. Resume. Again, there's so much we could talk about with resumes. This session is not fully on resumes, but we already talked about AI. A functional resume, if you're making a pivot, what that means is you can sort of, instead of chronologically ordering things, you can sort of order things by like skill set. It's a little bit more creative. It's definitely not traditional. So you might want to talk to somebody at JVS to see if that's right for you. Another thing I like to do with the resume is it's sort of like a mini functional resume where, say you have 6 bullets, you can group them into like 2 or 3 sections. So say you have your job title, but then you organize those bullets into mini little sections and you label them with the skills. So maybe you were a marketing manager, but you did project management as part of that. So you can still label those skill sets to call out key skills. LinkedIn, you
Sorry,
still want,
Rachel.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that I actually, when I pivoted from corporate marketing to nonprofit, I hired a career coach. This was a few years ago, and and I made a functional resume or a skills-based resume rather than just a strictly chronological. And it was a really, really good exercise, and especially when you want to switch careers. So I
Yeah,
just wanted to say
absolutely.
I've done that. Yeah.
Yeah, and the transferable skills, it's important to highlight that and get creative and use the language of the target job and lots of things you could be creative with the resume when you're pivoting. Same with LinkedIn, right? So even if you're pivoting, try to bring out all the words that relate to where you're trying to go as much as you can. The headline under your name, the about section, previous job titles, previous job descriptions. It's really important to review these with a mentor, with a peer, with a coach. You want to tailor your profile the same way you would tailor your resume and really make sure it has those keywords and that your branding is super strong and super clear. I would look at every single section of the profile. Video pitch, this is sort of just a creative idea. Like we have video at our disposal, so why not record yourself doing a 1 minute intro? You can upload that to YouTube. You can even make it unlisted so that it's not publicly available. But if you include the link on your resume or in a networking outreach or in a cover letter or even link it to your LinkedIn, people can meet you, right? So use video to your advantage. Show them your energy, your demeanor. Some people may or may not want to do this, but if you're trying to stand out, it's a creative thing you can do. Thought leadership. You might write a blog. You might create a video and post it on LinkedIn. You don't have to do this necessarily. I think if you're going to do anything, the blogs are great because after an interview, you could send a blog with, showing your expertise in the space. And of course, upskilling. So if you are doing a course or certification, add that to your materials. The one thing I didn't mention here is a portfolio or a website. So if you're in really any field these days, you can get creative and create a small portfolio. And it's just a more visual way to show your projects beyond, the resume is a little more simple in terms of formatting. So a portfolio, you can use Canva, you can use like PowerPoint slides, Google Slides, or even a very simple website. You do not need to go crazy with technical stuff, but it's just a more creative way to showcase who you are. And it shows that you're a professional that, goes above and beyond and you're a thought leader. Like it just sort of looks good. And it's also a different, more visual way that people can digest who you are. People might see things and sort of digest that information more quickly if you sort of visually prepare it, in a different way beyond the resume. So it's just an option.
So
Does that all
before
make
you
sense?
move
Yeah.
on, before you move on, um, so on the video pitch thing, I've done this as well on my LinkedIn. So if anyone wants to see an example, mine wasn't that thought out. I did it kind of spontaneously, but I have it in my featured posts on my LinkedIn profile, and you can see an example and how specific yet broad I was about where I wanted to pivot and where I wanted contacts from and what industries. So you can take a look at that.
Cool. Ready to keep going?
Yes.
Okay. Fake job postings. So just always verify the source before you engage. If somebody reaches out to you, check the company website, check the company LinkedIn page, check whether the role exists outside one job platform, and compare job description language across postings. Scrutinize email domains and contact info, right? So legitimate employers use company domains, not a Gmail, not an Outlook, or misspelled URLs are a dead giveaway. Watch for any urgency, guarantees, vague details, immediate hire, unusually high pay, unclear responsibilities. I also get like text messages all the time with this stuff. Like you're like literally never going to get a text unless you chatted with a recruiter and there's a human texting you after an interview. That's different. But like I get so many of these texts. Never share sensitive information, banking information, anything like that. Real employers will have a live conversation, right? So scammers will always avoid a conversation. So if you're not sure, you can always say, oh, like, when are you free for a chat? Trust your instincts and just slow down. You can always research, and just ChatGPT is great for this. AI is great for this. Google the company name plus scam. That's an option, right? You can also see if that elicits any results. Check LinkedIn. Do they have legitimate employees? Is there a real hiring manager? These are just a few tips to protect yourself. Hopefully, this is all straightforward. Any questions on this? Oh yes, Leora, definitely. I can pull up my LinkedIn at some point, but it's just if you find me on LinkedIn, hopefully I'll be there. I can send the link, but definitely connect with me. Elisa, any questions on this?
Yeah, give me a sec. Okay, it's not about fake job postings, but it's from an earlier topic. Advice for jumping into volunteering into your field, about volunteering in your field.
Oh yeah, volunteering is great. Well, first of all, you can volunteer even just outside of your field. Like you never know who you're going to meet. And then there's sometimes certain fields where they have like legitimate websites where they'll like pair you with a nonprofit and they'll like give you a project and it's pro bono, but you get, a resume experience, a portfolio builder experience. So you can look for things like that, or you could just network. And so you're already networking. So you can also offer, they might have paid hourly work, or they may just, you might offer and say, happy to do, like if you really love a company or a team, you may say, would be happy to set something up for 2 or 3 months to sort of act as an apprentice or an extension for your team and work on a project pro bono if you're open to it. And sometimes small to medium-sized companies might be open to that, or startups, right? And yeah, so you're networking and you're exploring like creative ways to see what projects can surface, or you're looking for websites that deliberately like pair companies with, people who are willing to do pro bono projects. But you can also just volunteer in any capacity, like with other things. You never know who you're going to meet that way. And especially in job search, if you're not working, volunteering is an amazing way to get out of the house, meet people, talk, just, feel better. It feels productive. It feels good. And you never know where it can lead.
There are a couple of questions for your point of view on a couple of different platforms. So what the one question is, which websites do you use to review companies? This person uses Glassdoor. And
hmm
then the other one is, have you heard of HireVue? And what do you think of that?
I have heard of HireVue, but I'm not an expert in that website.
Yes.
Glassdoor, of course, people use it. Honestly, if you're trying to learn about a company culture, go through their interviews and see how you feel, but also set up a call with somebody that works there who is not in your interview process. To try to get an objective take. Again, you're networking anyway. So when you do those networking calls, you can ask about the culture, you can ask about the vibe and the pace and the, values or traits of like how people are treated there. You can ask all those good questions. Glassdoor's okay, but like sometimes people who only have bad experiences are going to post on there. So
Yeah.
like to be perfectly honest, I don't even really check Glassdoor. I'd rather just talk to people. And sometimes if it's a big company, every department can really look and feel different. Every hiring manager can look and feel different. So I think just networking with people is like the best way. And then just get creative with what you ask. So you can sort of say, like, tell me about a time, somebody on the team brought up a new idea and how was that handled, right? Like, so ask for examples and stories, and that will show you the culture instead of just saying, what's the culture, right? Because everyone's going to be like, oh, it's great. It's like really easy to say nice, positive things, but, try to let them tell you how it operates and you'll determine how does that feel? Like, what do you think about that? How would you label that? And does that
Yeah.
feel right to you?
Yeah.
So really think about what traits are important to you and then come up with creative questions based on that.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you just said, of course. But the other thing that you can do is that when you're in the interview, when there's time for you to ask questions at the end, you can ask questions like, um, what are you looking for in the candidate for this position that maybe was different from who's had this job previously? Like you can sort of like try to figure out ways to get at it to see how they react to that.
Yeah.
Is there anything different in who you're looking for this role now than you've had previously? Are there any different targets, or was this job, did someone else have the same job, or has it evolved, and why has it evolved? Are there new targets for it? Like if you start asking questions like that, you may get some sense of how they're talking about previous employees, or maybe it's a great thing that the person before got promoted, and you find out that and then it can lead to hearing that the person who had it was promoted, and now and the team is growing and rah 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 rah, So you have that time because remember you're interviewing them as well. You want to make sure it's a good fit for yourself as well.
Yeah. I love those questions. Absolutely. Those are
Yeah.
wonderful. Yeah. Cool. Ready to keep going?
Yes.
Okay. So freelancing, you can work for yourself or for others, and this is just a different way of working, right? So it doesn't have to be full time. I think I saw some people in the chat might have mentioned this. But again, if you're working for yourself, you're sort of this freelancer who's offering the same skills that you would as a full timer, but you're offering to do that sort of in this part-time kind of way. But there's also companies that deliberately hire on contract or part-time. So it's a little different whether you're finding a gig that's part-time, and they're deliberately hiring that way, or freelancing sort of gives more of this idea of like, I'm gonna go find my clients, things like that. Um, Not all entrepreneurship needs to mean like you're a startup, right? You can just sort of like work in your own capacity. So whatever skills you would offer as a full-timer, you can offer as a part-time freelancer and work as a project-based or contract or consulting or freelancing. So, it's okay to consider it and be creative in how you offer your support. And it can be a bridge. It doesn't need to mean that you're showing up forever. Some people are just testing demand plan that way, building some income and revisiting full-time search later. Now, I don't want you to just default to this just because job search isn't working. Like if you think that full-time roles are truly the best for you and job search isn't working, you may need to just show up to your job search better and differently and learn about job search tactics. Or if you truly are considering entrepreneurship or freelancing, then absolutely show up to that, as well. But don't necessarily only use this because job search isn't working. You still want to make sure it feels right for you because, being a freelancer, it does look and feel a little different. You might want a website, you might have to run a sales process, you might need to send a contract, things like this that you're going to have to be comfortable to do. Skills first, right? So freelancers with certain skills are looked for, right? And you might be searching for a certain type of role, but there's so many ways to show up and offer those skills. It requires intention. It's best pursued with clarity and a plan. So don't just rush into it. Don't just default to it. But if you're excited about the idea, then, look into it, learn about it, maybe meet with other freelancers, understand how they got started. It's a strategy, it's a choice, right? If this feels interesting, again, you can absolutely lean into it. And, it lets you like earn, learn, and network all at the same time. You're testing market demand before committing to it. And it builds experience. That's the thing. Like it may actually help you later to get that full-time job because, you're building up just more experience on your resume. And then all of a sudden this full-time thing comes along and you've already been doing recent work. So it always, can look good. If anyone's considering it or has done this before, or has any thoughts or questions, now would be a good moment in the chat to talk about freelancing, gigs, part-time work, whatever you want to call it. These are all kind of synonyms for each other. Any
So
reactions?
Rachel,
Yeah.
how do you like, you are downsized or you lose your job and everybody around you says, "Oh, you should just be a freelancer, you should contract." And you're like, "Great." And then you're like, and then you start and you think, "How am I supposed to find these things? How am I supposed to find a contract or a freelance gig?" My question to add to what I just said to you is, are there like webs aside from networking, are there websites like Fiverr, any of these things? What
Oh
is your
yeah,
advice?
absolutely. Yeah,
How do you
Fiverr's
find
good.
networking gigs?
Yeah, Fiverr's good. Upwork is good. And there's definitely others. Like if you're
Okay.
in certain technical fields, like you want to continue to ask people what are other sites for our field that people look to find part-time work because there's definitely niche industry-based sites, but Upwork and Fiverr are like good, very broad examples. Um, and so your question is, how do you like get started, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, honestly, you're networking anyway for job search. So I think like at the end of your networking call, you kind of just want to try to wrap up with like next steps. And, at the end of your networking call, you can be direct and honest and say, I'm actively exploring my next steps. If your preference is full time, you can ask, like, oh, you mentioned these teams that align with my skills. Is there any opportunities? And if they say no, then your sort of second question might be, has your company ever explored contract or part-time support? That's something I've actually been, doing as well. So you're already networking no matter what, right? You can just sort of mention that. I think with freelancing in a more true, like I go find my clients, you're networking and you're trying to find small companies and you're trying to network with them to learn about what they do. And when you learn about their challenges and you have these calls, you might submit like a proposal that they didn't even know they needed, right? And all of a sudden you lend your expertise and you have this contract and you just learned about their challenges and you're like, here's what I do. And all of a sudden they're intrigued because you can solve their problems in a way that they might not have realized. And there was no job posting. So again, you're networking with people who are relevant, even if there's no open role online. So, 3 to 5 meetings a week, if not more, with people who are just doing relevant work to your field. And then you sort of see where it goes. And then, again, you need to be comfortable with like, what's my process? What questions do I need to ask? Like, if I were to put together a contract or a proposal, what do I need to know that this business needs? Like, what are their challenges? What's their current state? What's their goal? All that, what's their team? Like, you're sort of really doing this research on them. And then you might come up with a contract or a proposal, right? So you're building your own business in the sense that, do you have a brochure or like do you have a PowerPoint? Like what explains your process? What explains your services? What explains how you would work with them? You might need to think about pricing. If you're considering this, honestly, I would take a few weeks and just meet with other freelancers who are in your field and ask how they do it and just like learn a lot about this, and start small. It's never going to feel perfect. You're never going to feel ready. Don't wait a year until you have a website to get started. Just start small and just test the waters, right? And there's really no harm in just talking to people and seeing where it goes. And like your practice will help you get better. Plus, by the way, AI, ChatGPT, it's free and it's so helpful. So you can just say, I'm trying to be a freelancer, like help me get started. And it can absolutely be your coach and guide you through, starting really small. If you're nervous to do it, whatever's on your mind, like ChatGPT can absolutely guide you through this stuff. But yeah, there's a lot more we could probably talk about, but I hope that helps the getting started moment.
No, that's excellent. I think that covers somebody asked if they need to set up an LLC. And I would just say to what
Oh
Rachel's saying,
yeah.
a lot of
LLC I
research.
would do only when you're about to either like sign a contract with anybody or give or receive money. So I think a lot of people trip up over these like early steps that they think they have to do immediately. By the way, it takes like 10 minutes to make an LLC on LegalZoom. But I wouldn't worry about that until you're like about to sign a contract or about to give or receive money for some reason. And then you can worry about it.
Yeah.
But also,
Okay, we have,
if you're
mhm,
debating LLC versus other legal structures, talk with an accountant as well,
yeah.
about what, works for you. There's legal and there's tax sort of implications to all of this. But I think a lot of people stress about all these like pieces before they get started. So just like get started and see if this is something you even want to do and if there's demand and what would it look like. And then when you start getting to the point of like, oh, I think actually this might go somewhere, then you can like deal with all that other stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, one more question. If I'm training or doing a side gig that's unrelated to my field, can I talk about it on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I mean, it depends how prominent it's gonna be. Maybe like LinkedIn has sections, you might put it under projects or something, which goes towards the bottom, or volunteering. If it's not related, you could add it to your profile, but maybe not in the main experience section. Or if it's showing that you have a current job, then it might look good because you're like doing work currently. So you could put it in that experience section. But maybe try to work on the phrasing so it doesn't seem like totally irrelevant. You could try to again phrase it creatively. So I think there's options depending on, your situation, but it does look good to show that you're doing something. Side gigs in general are just good because people are interesting and we like to learn about what you do. And it just shows that you take initiative. It can show that you're a creative person. It can show that you're entrepreneurial. It can show like positive traits that somebody, wants to see. Like if you're able to have a side gig, like that shows pretty positive things about you as a professional and your capabilities, your potential. If you got something off the ground, like that looks good.
I have another question related to freelancing. Okay. So when freelancing or contracting, is it required to share that information during an interview? And when do you share this information once I am negotiating an offer letter? Do I have a legal responsibility to provide this information?
Yeah, so I mean, if you are doing any contracting or freelancing, like hopefully it's on your resume and your LinkedIn. So like in theory, they would have already known that. If it's not on your materials, I don't think you need to bring it up unless they ask you, but usually in like an employment contract when you're signing that, they might mention something about other work, disclosing other work, things like that. So every company, if you get an offer, you'd have to read that. But depending on like how many hours that gig is, like most likely you should probably disclose it at some point. But it should probably already be on your materials to begin with, would be the best way to
Yeah, I
go.
think the key here is it's fine that you've been doing it. Maybe the question is more about if you want to continue doing it while you're working in a full-time job, right?
Right, right,
And
absolutely.
that's where, you have to just I would disclose it. Like you want to make sure it's not, if it is a competitive industry, like if it's something that's related to your work, friends, then you just have to read through your employment
Yeah,
contract
especially if it's
whether if
related, right? Like they may
it's
say
related.
they have restrictions on, like competitors and things like that. So absolutely like
Exactly. Like
read
we
the
I have we
contract.
have someone here who works part-time at Macy's on Saturdays. That's not a conflict of interest. She can do her job Monday to Friday. here, and on Saturday she works at Macy's, right? We just know because she's told all of us she works at Macy's. But if it was somebody who was doing similar work on the side, that would need to be disclosed.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Yes.
especially if it's relevant. And again, I would just
Yeah.
be honest and have it like on your resume and LinkedIn to begin with anyway.
Yeah. Rachel,
Um,
how you doing? You're
Yeah,
doing
no,
good?
no. I just have this other slide here about career clarity, right? So I just want to reiterate to everybody that it's really important to pursue roles that are aligned with you. It's going to make you feel better as a person, physically and mentally. It increases your wealth potential. It makes your job search more efficient, and it makes your organic career development just easier. You're going to advance in a better way, and you're going to feel more productive, more impactful, and more innovative. So just be very careful. A lot of times people are pursuing too many different types of roles. They're not sure what's a fit for them. Take the time you need to explore, to reflect, to research, to network with people. You should feel super, super clear about what's right for you, what's a fit for you. It makes a huge difference when you get onto the job. And just your overall career path and your happiness, right? So like and just the job search, it's just a lot harder when you're pursuing too many things and you're not sure the best fit. So do make sure you take the time to look into your options, prioritize, figure out what's right for you, learn a lot about these roles, meet with those people, ask questions. Um, I think it's this counterintuitive myth where people think that looking into more types of things gives them more options. But I usually find it's the opposite. When you have too many options, it slows you down, it's overwhelming, it can be confusing, it can be stressful. So narrowing down on your path that fits, but then increase the volume of how many people you talk to in that field. So career clarity is super, super important. If anyone has questions on how to find clarity, I'm sure we have a recording from a past session that goes much deeper into exploration. I'm sure we could dig that up. But it's really important to spend the time you need to learn and get really, really clear. So any thoughts or questions on career exploration, career clarity? Let us know in the chat.
Okay. I have a question here. Um, it's interesting. Most of my writing samples are political or social justice related. Should I edit that when applying to corporations?
Sorry, I want to see most of my examples. Can you read it again?
Yeah, no, exactly. So most of my writing samples are political or social justice related. Should I edit that when applying to corporations? I have an
Well, it
opinion as
depends
well.
on your field. Like if you're a communications person and you need
Yeah.
writing samples, um, that being said, honestly, if you're a communications person, I would hope they would just look at the style of your writing and not judge. But the problem is people judge for all kinds of things. And so with social justice or political things, it's a toss up and it's a risk that somebody might have an opinion. But the way you could look at this is, look, if they're judging me for what I wrote, then I probably don't want to work there anyway. So again, if you have a lot of work samples, then like I wouldn't want you to redo all that work. Like that's who you are. That's things you wrote. But I understand, your questions. Sometimes it feels dicey, political and social justice things people have opinions about, right? So, if you can obviously lead with some examples that are not as, maybe subjective or I don't know the right word, but if you have any other work samples, then I would lead with those if you can. Again, I don't want you to redo good work that you've done, but you kind of just have to make a choice. Do I want to lead with who I am and hope, and if they judge me, then I don't want to work there anyway? Or do I want to make sure that nobody has any room to judge me at all, right? So that's just a personal choice, and it just depends on like again, if you have other great samples, probably lead with things like that. But if this is a big part of the work that you've done, like I think that's okay. And you don't need to like redo your work necessarily.
Yeah. And the other thing to consider is that if your work is online anywhere, anybody can find it. So you're not hiding
Right.
anything. It's
Right.
what Rachel is talking about is what you choose to amplify in your interview, to amplify in your application. You're not erasing it. They're going to find like it's there. So, and that's a good reminder to everybody that whatever you put out there on social media, it's there and people are going to be able to find it.
Right.
So
Great point. Yep.
Yeah. So it's about what you want to amplify.
Yep.
Okay. Rachel, thank you. Thank you so much. This was excellent. I know we had so many different topics because we talked about that ahead of time, that these are topics people wanted to hear about. And you were just excellent going through them, giving us information and addressing the questions. And I just want to thank you so much on behalf of JBS.
Yeah, you're welcome.